on with Mason Murphy-Lenk. Mason, thanks for coming in.
Thanks. I'm so happy to be here. I've looked forward to being on this for a long time.
Good. I'm glad. Piloting, and you want to be a pilot someday. I want to hear all about it.
Yes, I do. So this last summer, between my junior and my senior year, I started taking flight lessons at a local airport. And it was because my mom, she's a flight attendant for Southwest. She sort of got me into that. So I started taking flight lessons at a local airport, and I'm currently working on my private pilot's license right now, which is the first step in the progression to the airlines.
Let me ask you, what is your mom's life like? Like, what is that experience like to be a flight attendant with a big airline like Southwest?
Yeah. So ever since I was really little, she's typically gone for about half a week. And she's traveling all over the country. I mean, Southwest is a domestic airline, I believe, mostly. I think they have a few international flights. But for the most part, she's going all across the country for 3 days at a time. She stays in hotels. She works pretty long days, like I say, like probably 12 to 16-hour days most of the time. And yeah, she's going through to all places of the country. Like, I'll talk to her at night sometimes, and she'll be like, "Yeah, I traveled to Florida, and I went to California, and then to Utah today, and I'm staying in Utah right now." And then the next day, she's in Minneapolis. So it's just she's everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Does she like that? Does she like to experience all of these different places? Does she get any time, I guess, when she's there to hang out and explore, or is she right back on the plane?
Yeah, so actually the benefits of that career, I think, especially for flight attendants, is that they do get a hotel, and a lot of the times they have time to rent a car and go places. Like, I think they fly to Bozeman, Montana.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and she hasn't done it yet, but she's been talking to some of her friends that work for the airline too, and they were going to schedule a trip together that overnighted in Bozeman and overnight, like they stay over in Bozeman for like 18 hours, and they were going to go to Yellowstone.
Oh, wow.
Which is pretty cool, yeah.
Yeah, I've been to Bozeman. That's a cool airport, too. It's like sort of, I don't know, it feels very Bozeman, what you imagine. Like, I got off and it was like, all right, it's I don't know what the building is made out of, but it feels like you're in Montana when you land there. So that's cool.
Yeah, I've seen pictures. It's super cool, for sure.
So what made you, I guess, decide that this is the career that you want? Because a lot of high school kids, they don't know what they want to do when they graduate, and it's pretty special that you sort of have an idea. And I know that your mom probably played a big hand in that, but what were some of the first experiences where you were like, I want to be a pilot?
Right. So, going into high school, I was like everyone else pretty much. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a doctor for a long time, but after I took AP Chemistry, I kind of changed my mind because that was a hard class. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do again. So I was sort of stuck in that uncertainty. And then, like, on the news, my parents would talk about, like, oh, there's a pilot shortage. So there's a huge pilot shortage. And my mom was like, well, why don't you try being a pilot? I'll take you on a discovery flight, which is where you go to a local airport with an experienced pilot that sort of takes you up and shows you the controls, and then you can sort of gauge whether you like flying in a small plane or not, and you can see if you like it, because she was like, it's pretty lucrative. A lot of the pilots I know are doing pretty well, and I was like, okay, but when I was really like, I was pretty not like wanting. I didn't think I was gonna like being a pilot. Just because I was like, well, I feel like my Gilman education was preparing me for more of something that was more of like a master's degree or, higher than that, like a route like that, or like a medical school or like being a lawyer or something more academic. And then when I went up in the plane, it's something just sort of clicked. Like, I just sort of knew that was where I was supposed to be in a way. When I got in the plane and we started like flying over everything, it just felt like I was like in the purest sense, like freedom. And that was a really unique experience for me, because often I felt confined within like wherever I've been, if that makes sense. Like, just I felt like I've wanted to be able to explore instead of just being stuck. And I've never wanted a desk job. But once I stepped foot in a plane, or I guess sat down in a plane, I don't know if you step foot in those small planes. It was really magical.
Scary? Were you up there and terrified
Yeah.
of heights and the fact that you're controlling this, this vehicle in the air and looking down on the earth? I mean, how did you find that sense of peace that you're talking about when it's such a scary experience?
It's a really good question. It takes time for sure. I remember like the first couple times I went up, I thought I was gonna die like the entire time. And I think routinely when I go up, it's like it's just there's so many different like things that could go wrong in the plane that it's almost better like you should like obviously learn about them, but like it sometimes like if you don't think about it in that way, like and like you're gonna die like that, it's almost better. But it is safe. I mean, there's trained instructors and stuff. But yeah, definitely very scary.
Yeah, you need a little bit of that anxiety maybe to perform well, under that pressure. It's part of the experience, right? Like
Yeah,
when you're nervous to give a speech or a presentation or something, usually it goes a little bit better than if you're not nervous and you're just winging it, right?
100%. Yeah, and I think that sort of ability to deal with stress under pressure sort of defines your success as a pilot and how good of a pilot you are. Because oftentimes in aviation, from what I've heard from instructors in my own experiences, a lot of stuff can go wrong, and you can't be expecting something to happen the entire time. Like the winds could change and stuff. Wind's a huge factor in aviation. Like the winds are so variable, and when I first went up, it was almost strange, like how it affected the plane. Because like the planes that I fly in with everyone in it are probably like close to 2,000 pounds, and like a small gust on the ground that you feel, it's like, oh, that's not that bad. It like actually changes like the trajectory of the plane in the air. So you have to adjust for that. But yeah, no, definitely your ability to think under pressure sort of defines your skills.
On a really windy day, say the wind is blowing everywhere and you're up in the plane, what do you do to adjust to that? Are there certain tips that they give you on a windy day?
Yeah, so there's a technique that they call crabbing, and what it is when you're crabbing is if you're flying a plane with a tailwind, so the wind's like pushing your plane forward, that's like an optimal day. But if it's pushing you from the side, if you want to go that same direction, you sort of have to turn, I would say, to a different angle to the wind. So it still pushes you in that way, but the motor and the propeller of the plane are propelling you in a different direction. So like the vectors sort of align, and then you still maintain that like trajectory, I would say.
How often do you go up in a plane?
So during the summers, it was probably like 6 days a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a lot. I do about like 2-hour lessons.
How many years have you been doing this?
Just since last summer, so just since my junior.
But still, that's some good experience right
No,
there.
yeah, for sure. I think I have about like 40 hours in terms of experience. But yeah, now I go up as all weather depending. So like there's a lot of rules. Sometimes because I'm flying under a private pilot's license, I have to follow what's called VFR rules. And VFR rules are sort of they pertain to private pilots, but there's requirements for how strong, not so much the wind, but what the visibility is like. So are there clouds obstructing your view? What's the ceilings like? So like how high above the ground are the clouds? And then there's some other rules too, but they sort of dictate how much I can go up. So I'm scheduled for about 3 days a week, but on a good week I'll probably hit like all 3 or maybe 2. Sometimes, like in the month of January, I had it every weekend. I didn't go up one time because the weather was just so like abysmal in January for flying.
I always wonder when it's raining and you're on the runway and you're about to take off when they call it off, or when they say, oh, it's too wet and slippery and the weather's too bad. Like, what's the threshold for that call to be made?
I would say a lot of the times it's up to like the pilot's discretion. So
Yeah.
A lot of the times it's more about whether the pilot feels safe or not. And that's honestly, I would say more important than like the rules, because I mean, you want the pilot to be, safe flying you out of the airport. If he doesn't think that the plane can handle it, then, or if he doesn't think he can handle it, I think, and I'm not sure about this because I haven't really studied a lot of like airline transport. I think it's more about icing. I think it's less about rain and more about icing, or if there's like a torrential downpour or something,
Right.
some like extreme rain. But
Visibility.
yeah, no, visibility for sure. That's a huge part. I do know that one. It's like a mile. I think it's a mile or less of visibility to take off in most airports. Not in all airports. It's all different depending on the airport. So it's there's a lot of rules, and it's sort of can be difficult, challenging to learn. I guess, but yeah, no, the rain can definitely play a part. But it's usually extreme, or if it was like icing.
It's interesting you brought up the pilot's discretion versus the rules because it makes me think of this movie Sully with Tom Hanks that you brought into our leadership and character class this fall. And that movie is, I mean, it's all about this pilot defying the rules, the regulations, what he was supposed to be doing when the birds flew in the engine, right? A bunch of birds flew in the engine.
Yeah.
And he had to emergency land this plane over the Hudson River, and he does it successfully. No one dies. It was a huge news event in, I don't know, like 2009 maybe.
Yeah, I think it was 2009.
2009. But I was so interested in his role as a leader and how you described him as a leader, because sometimes defying the rules and the handbook and the regulation and doing what you really know deep down is the right thing to do there, which he did, defines a leader. And that's maybe why that movie was made and why he's so celebrated. Chesley Sullenberger, right?
Yeah, Chesley Sullenberger, yes. That's one of my favorite movies. I saw that sophomore year, and that like really made me like consider being a pilot, because I liked how he was. I just liked his leadership qualities. I think that he wasn't really. What's actually interesting about the story is that he actually wasn't supposed to fly that trip. It was his wife, who was also a pilot for, I believe it's U.S. Airways. That
Oh,
he
really?
flies for. Yeah, they're not. I think they got bought out by American Airlines, but his wife was actually supposed to fly that trip, and he took that trip for her. So it could have been his wife in there, and it could have gone differently, if it was a different person, obviously. But it's really interesting because what makes, in my mind, what makes him a leader and what makes him so important was that he took out off of LaGuardia Airport, which is in New York City, and he flew, and I think it was pretty close, maybe under 10,000 feet, or it could have been lower. He hit two birds and got a double bird strike in both engines, which basically meant that he didn't have any control over the power of the plane anymore. Like he couldn't adjust the throttle or anything that would sort of bring power to the plane, and he had to make a quick decision. And if you listen, it's actually published online. Sort of the air traffic control, like who he was talking to, and the air traffic controllers talking to him. And it's really interesting because they keep asking him, do you want to go to this other airport? I think there was another airport in New Jersey he could have landed at. He's like, nope, landing in the Hudson. And he stayed very clear to that story. Mm-hmm. And I in the movie, there was this big, and not to spoil it too much, but there was this big scene where the NTSB, which is the National Transportation and Security Division, or NTSD, or something like that. It's the agency for transportation that sort of investigates all the accidents. They were deeply questioning him. And in the movie, it seems like they sort of Hollywooded up and make it a bigger deal than it was, I feel like.
Right. They do the simulation and they say, look, man, you could have definitely made it to Newark, easily.
It was Newark, yeah.
Yeah, Newark Airport easily, and you still decided to risk everyone's lives by landing in the Hudson. And Sully just goes, no, I mean, maybe I could have made it to Newark in this simulation, but in real time, when you're freaking out and there are birds in your engine and the plane's going down, you've got to make a call. And I wasn't thinking about, measuring whether it was feasible to make it to Newark. I was doing what was best in that split second, right? That's what he says.
Yeah, it is. And, he chalks it up to human error. And I think in the movie, and this part I think is true, but I'm not completely sure, they actually tested it 16 times before they even got that perfect. They had to run the trials and the simulations 16 times with experienced pilots to even make it to Newark in the simulation, right? And then they don't take into and I think what Sully says in the movie, and I think what it was in real life too, is it needs to be. You can't just chalk it up to making a split second decision, because when you're in sort of the heat of the situation and all of that sort of fear and suspense and sort of the uncertainty of what's going to happen is looming over you. You have to some of that's human error too. There's just going to be you're going to need to think about that a lot longer, because you're suddenly you have all these stresses on you. So, and I think that's what he says in the movie. And so then I think in the movie they allowed for 30 to 45 seconds of human error in the simulations, and there was just no way. It was just impossible to make it.
Yeah. What I like about that movie too is it's fairly short. It doesn't drag on. It's an hour and a half, which is perfect, and you get the whole story and makes sense, and you still see the complexities of this whole situation, but it's short and sweet.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they were just trying to like lay his story out there. They weren't trying to make all these special effects and all this stuff that didn't really need to happen. They were just trying to tell it as true to the original as possible. And that, to me, that made it one of my, a good movie and one of my favorite movies, of all time.
Yeah. So Mason, so beyond piloting and your interest in piloting in the future, tell me about your senior year. What's been going on, and what's new in your life?
Cool. So yeah, senior year, it's been really interesting. I'd say one of the more interesting things about my senior year is my entrepreneurship class. Definitely been looking at like business ideas and sort of trying to like figure out like ways, learning all about money, figure out ways to sort of design a business. I'm learning a lot. That's probably the highlight right now. But throughout senior year, I've really enjoyed senior retreat. I've really enjoyed I really enjoyed, a lot. There's a lot of aspects like that I think that are given to us as like a lot of, I don't know what to call it, sort of like gifts given to us as seniors, privileges. There we go. Privileges given to us as seniors that we sort of didn't realize were going to be given to us as juniors, and it's sort of hard not to take them for granted in my experience, because you sort of see with the gifts also come like the underclassmen like looking up to you, and it took me a little while for me to understand like how my actions like impact younger grades in terms of like what I'm doing every day. So it's helped me become more mindful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
In what ways? I think of the dress code as one thing, because the seniors, if the seniors come into school and they're all buttoned up and they have their tie on and their shirts tucked in and belt on and are following the dress code, the younger kids look up to that and say, oh, maybe I need to do that too, and I can't walk around my shirt untucked. And I think the seniors set the tone for the culture of the school. And if I think about the afternoon schedule too, it's wide open, and if the seniors are just doing whatever, leaving campus or hanging out, the underclassmen will do the same thing. So then it just bleeds into the whole school culture. Right?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think that maybe I heard someone talking about how like our year is particularly bad or something with the dress code, and then like the underclassmen follow. But yeah, that's definitely like a really good example of that. Other things I've like noticed is, especially I've been on, so my water polo team, we actually had a few underclassmen, but not just that team, but other events that I've heard, and I've heard people talk about this too. But all the freshmen and sophomores especially always seem to like mimic, the seniors' actions or even juniors' actions. As an upperclassman, you have this huge responsibility to act a certain way, and if you want, as a leader, honestly, and that's what you are as an upperclassman, I think the best way to lead is by example because of that. Like these experiences have showed me that. So.
Yeah, it's good stuff. You're winding down. You've got a couple months left, which is crazy.
I know.
Spring break, right? And then April, May is pretty wide open because you're doing the encounter thing. Are you going to be doing anything with piloting for the encounter, the internship experience?
So
no?
I don't have a clear encounter yet. I'm still doing some research, but I think my mom has a connection with the chief pilot in Baltimore. So I've reached out to him, and he seems like it could work. And I would love to intern with him. The chief pilot has so many responsibilities within the airport, and I would learn so much about aviation and like how airport airplane operations and airline operations work at an airport, which would be really cool to me. That sort of goes more into aviation management, but it's still really useful for me to know. But yeah, I would learn a lot from that.
Yeah,
also
that'd be
looking
great.
at some like real estate opportunities. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, my thought on the encounter at Gilman, I had a similar experience in high school where I followed a doctor around and went into surgery and watched a little bit of that, and I loved it. I thought it was interesting. It made me think about the medical field in a slightly different way than I had expected. But I think that's what it's all about, is either doing something that you could foresee yourself doing in the future as a profession, right, for 2 weeks and get a deeper sense of it, or doing something that you'll never have the opportunity to do again, maybe, like something sort of fun and really different. I think 2 weeks, there's not much you can do with that time in reality, right? It's 2 weeks. It's quick. So, I don't know, thinking about things that you can do that are like once in a lifetime experiences now that you have that wide open window. So it's an awesome experience offered here, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think it sort of gives you a snapshot of something you're interested in. So like sort of like instead of like a day in a life, maybe like 2 weeks in the life, and it's sort of you can sort of see how people in the field are working because you're observing your environment, and then you're also placed into it. So you probably have some tasks that you with the job, I would guess, for most encounters. And I think it's really interesting because, and I'm actually wondering, but I would get about this, but I would guess that most people or a lot of people sort of shift what they want to do because they're like, oh, I don't actually want to do this. Like, this sucks, right? And then because it's terrible, they decide to do something else. So then they might get some career shifts.
Yeah.
So no, I think it's definitely. I really like how Gilman does it. Or I haven't experienced it, but I like how Gilman proclaims to do it because I think it's just a really interesting concept, and it sort of gives you some insight into the industry you want to pursue.
Something else I wanted to talk to you about today is traveling men and your voice and singing and what that means to you and how long you've been singing for.
Right. So I've been involved in singing groups pretty much since I was. I mean, if you want to take it back that far, so my mom would always sing with me as a child, and I always really I took like sort of I had an affinity for it. I enjoyed it. So she put me in some music classes when I was younger, and it was pretty simple. I think it's just very hard for me to remember because it was so long ago. But I think we sang like "Mary Had a Little Lamb," and we learned some of the notes, like C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and sort of like where they are, like reading sheet music. And then when I went with Miss Simon in the lower school, she was the music teacher there. Her love for singing and her love for music in general sort of really brought me into that. And it sort of really inspired me to continue with that. And then, throughout the years with Miss Beckman in the middle school and Mr. Ford in the upper school, it's really, cultivated a great, like this love for music. And I've really, enjoyed that. I was in the band and jazz band for a while, but with the classes I was taking, it became too difficult to manage. But yeah, no, I've always loved music. I've been in the Traveling Men since I was a freshman, been in the Glee Club since I was a freshman. And we do a lot of different gigs in the Traveling Men, like just around our local community. And also in Europe. We also go to Europe once every 2 years, which is really a really cool experience.
Where'd you go recently?
So I didn't actually go on this one, but the group went to Portugal. And then I went as a seventh grader. I went to Italy.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was really cool. From my Italy experience, I've really enjoyed. As a much younger person, because I was, a seventh grader, looking up to the seniors and watching how they do things and performing at these different venues that were just like amazing. Like we performed at the Pantheon. In Rome,
it's insane.
Which was for a Catholic mass actually, which was really cool. We had to learn a bunch of songs in Latin, and that was such a rewarding experience. Definitely like one of the highlights of my singing career, if not the like best highlight. But it was so cool to just stand there and sing, and it was fantastic.
What So I've never been a part of a singing group in my life, and I've played sports, and we both play sports. Play water polo. I played lacrosse. What are the main like differences and similarities of being on a sports team like water polo and being in a group of musicians or singers? Like what do you see connects these two different experiences? Right.
Well, so the thing with that is, from my experience, music and sports have been two very different communities. I would say, like personalities-wise, the people that gravitate towards music and towards sports, although there is like a very like wide distribution, like there's a huge blend. But I find that people that like, from my experience, people that like to play sports are more of let's sort of like. They like to just like go into it head first, very headstrong people, and they're like, let's go, let's get it done, like let's do this. Sort of, I don't want to say impulsive, but sort of like just very much like let's go, let's do it right now, sort of people. And musicians are more like let's appreciate the music, let's take a step back.
Yeah.
And then I was captain of the water polo team and president of the Traveling Men, and it was learning how to lead in those two different scenarios were very, very interesting for me because I would often go from Traveling Men to water polo, and I would have to like sort of adjust in a way.
Interesting.
And it was really cool because before, I had the the privilege to be the captain of the water polo team, the president of the traveling men. I didn't have that experience. I didn't really like see the differences between them because I wasn't paying attention. But it's really cool, and there's also similarities too. Like both of them are like equally motivated at their respective things. I think especially in traveling men, people are motivated to blend and to sort of work together as a team, and it's the same as water polo. There's definitely the sense of community in both, and I think community in both aspects are extremely important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really interesting way of thinking about it. When you say you have to switch your leadership tactics from one to the other, what do you mean by that? Like, what was your approach at Traveling Men, and then what did you change, or how did you shift when you went to water polo practice?
So, typically, like, and this may be because water polo is a water sport, but typically when I was in Traveling Men. Sometimes there would be people talking, to each other when we were supposed to be learning music and singing. And part of, in the Traveling Men, I do teach some of the music because we do split off. Mr. Ford teaches most of it, but sometimes we split off and we learn different sections that he's already taught us, and we just go over them again as a group. And just sort of, and I'm still learning. I'm not perfect, but just like learning to sort of like bring them, together and to have them stop talking, or to have, my peers, like focus on the music is very different because, in Traveling Men and in Glee Club, there's a lot of talking going on. Where in water polo, it's very much just like single focus, like I would say like staring, like sort of into space. And it's just a very, like the way I think I approached it was I would sort of try to assert myself as a leader and say, like, hey, like we need to be focused on the music here. Whereas in water polo, I would say it's more like, and it's more like sort of going towards your goals, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like sort of like looking ahead towards your goals. In water polo, that was the next game, right?
Right.
And the problem was in music, it was a concert, and the concert could be months and months in advance. Where in water polo, the next game was probably like a week away.
Yes.
So it was a lot. I would say it was more difficult for me to get people in music focused because of that. But
A little more urgency in the sports realm.
yes, for sure, definitely more urgency, and
Yeah.
that's a huge defining characteristic for sure. But there were different things that I think Mr. Ford implemented to sort of give us that sense of urgency sooner. Like there was this thing that we did called quartets, which is where one person from each part has to go up on stage and sing to like prove that they know their part. So that sort of brought a sense of urgency to the group. But yeah, it was definitely about inspiring that sense of urgency. I definitely have to work harder in Glee Club to do that.
And your water polo team, I mean, your Glee Club and Traveling Men are certainly successful. I love going to the concerts and watching you guys perform.
Thank you.
But your water polo team was like, you guys were awesome this year, right? You were
Yeah.
champions.
Yeah, we played really well. Everyone on water polo, everyone worked really, really hard. And I think both JV and varsity were undefeated too in the MIAA season. So it was fantastic. I've always really enjoyed being a part of that experience. But there was this sense of, since there were like 12 seniors on the varsity team this year, there was this really cultivated sense of brotherhood. And that this last season was one of my most memorable experiences here at Gilman. Just that sense of brotherhood, because we'd all been playing water polo together since we were, like for 4 years, and we understood each other's skill levels and all this like skill and sort of personalities. And it was really cool to watch it like come together. And honestly, even though I had the title of captain, I didn't really feel like a captain because I felt like every senior on that team had their own like respective duties as a leader, and equally contributed to the team. Obviously, like there was just so much community represented in that team that was just really inspiring for me.
Yeah, it seems like you were all bought in, right? That's what it takes. All the seniors and everyone on the team bought in.
We all bought into the program. And we knew we had to win this year, so it was just really inspiring for me. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, we all bought into the program.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome stuff. Well, Mason, let's get to your book rec for today.
Cool.
Some book that you would recommend for our listeners and watchers. What do you have for us?
Cool. So I guess I could hold up to the camera Watchmen. It's by Alan Moore and illustrated by Dave Gibbons, I believe. And I'm reading this book in my dystopian fiction class right now. I actually just finished it last night. But it was a really, really, really good. It's a graphic novel, which I haven't read since I was 8, but this one is definitely geared towards an adult audience. And it was very inspiring for me. Not to spoil too much about the book, but there's this discussion about like morality throughout the book. It kind of questions morality. And sort of like what's best, and then it also questions this feeling of like, I would say like what's right and what's wrong, sort of like knowing what's right and what's wrong is sort of a different perspective through the characters in the book, and it sort of questions like what is a hero too. So I found that really inspiring. Another big theme of the book that I wanted to talk about was this sense of community, like I was talking about in water polo and traveling man, which is originally why I gravitated towards those in general, because there was this really tight, like close-knit sense of community in each one. This book talks a lot about people being very self-focused versus like sort of coming together as a community and understanding their different, like the different viewpoints, the different perspectives. And it was just this sense of community I was like people wanted in this book was really inspiring to me as a reader. And sort of it just illustrates the importance of community to me.
Wow.
So
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have never read this, and I forgot that it was a graphic novel. So it's been a while since I've read a graphic novel myself. So maybe I'll tap into that. What is this dystopian fiction class like? Because I feel like my British novels class this semester, which has 3 people in it, which is low numbers, but it's actually a great class. We're reading some similar books to Miss Carper's class, right?
It's Miss Carper's class.
Yeah, so what's that class like? What do you guys read other than Watchmen, and how do you like it?
So we're also reading Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, which was a fantastic novel.
I'm reading that right now in mine too.
Oh, you are?
Yep.
That was a fantastic book. I really enjoyed it. I really like how the class is structured for sure. We have these big group discussions that we sit around a round table and we talk about it. About each, we have an assignment to read, I think, 1 or 2 chapters of the book, and then we talk about it. And it's the same for this one, but the discussions for Brave New World were student facilitated. So the students had to come. So every single class, students were elected, the class before at the beginning of the book to come up for these specific chapters and sort of ask questions to the audience. And it was really interesting to see. These discussions are interesting because I often learned that like when I was reading the book, I thought like, oh, like, I'm like really knowledgeable on what was happening, and then they brought some like entirely new quality that what the book expressed, and I was like, wow, I didn't even think about that, but it makes total sense. Like that's really cool.
Yeah. And
like even Miss Carper learned, like it sounded like there were things that she didn't think about either, and she had taught the book for 5 years.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's really interesting. But
I mean, that's certainly happening in my class with me. Like I'll read, we read like 30 pages before each class, and I'll come in and the 3 students in my class will notice things that I didn't even see or I skimmed over. And the book's so interesting because it's almost eerie how much he predicts the future and predicts what's going on right now.
Like I think there was definitely some similarities between that and like World War II for sure. It's crazy. Like now, I know the book is talked about as sort of like, sort of a book that sort of almost like preemanates the future, like sort of like it like talks. It's like very. There's definitely a lot of qualities in it that are futuristic, but I almost brought that book in instead of this one, and that book talks a lot about like it questions like family a lot.
Yep.
Like the idea of family and what is family and what does love mean and all of that. It's just there's all these like. It's almost like the government in that book tried to strip the characters of their humanity, and by stripping them of their humanity, it sort of made them this society that was very much like they didn't ever really feel a real sense of human connection. And again, not to spoil too much, but when you look at, and I'm trying to remember the reservation in that book, which is a community of people that were, quote, savages, people that were, not indoctrinated with their society. Their society was also considered dystopian by, I would say, modern day standards. But it was really interesting to see how they like meshed through, like how they aligned and how they were similar and how certain characters decided that they were sort of split between the two worlds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we just got to the part where Linda and what's the other character? Linda and her son John come to the Brave New World Society and are introduced to the director, and he resigns. That's where we are right now.
Yeah, and I think that was definitely a really powerful moment, because there was this whole like, oh, society should be perfect, and by seeing Linda and John, who Linda was definitely, I think, more like the characters in that book don't really age, almost.
Yeah.
Because they go through all these like bone marrow shots and stuff in the story. Linda didn't have any of that, and as she was part of society, of the Brave New World before, but then she was. They were taking a tour of the reservation. I think she got lost, and then she got introduced to a different society, the society that lives on the reservation. And it was really interesting to me, because when seeing her and her being aged, someone who would probably like most people are today, like we don't really have people that are that young almost, right? Like we don't have people that look that young at her age. But seeing that was just such a shock. It was like horrific to them that it just sort of changed their perspective, I think, too.
Right.
On like what goes on, and
Right.
sort of seeing that like these people aren't like unintelligent. They're just different, and maybe they have just a different sense of life, and maybe it's just really interesting how Huxley twists those into the book.
Yeah, and I think what he gets right in his prophetic, thinking about the future, is the role of pleasure in our lives. Like today, it's so common that you're sitting on the subway, or you're at a traffic light, or you're in the waiting room and you're just scrolling on your phone, just getting that, those dopamine rushes from whatever video you're watching or whatever sound you're listening to. Like you put in your headphones and listen to music. Like he predicted all of this social media and like quick, what do you call it? Like
a dopamine rush. Or something.
Dopamine rush,
Yeah.
right? Like getting pleasure really quickly and at your fingertips. And I feel like he foresaw that even before smartphones and Netflix and all this other stuff around us.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned that, it brings me back to something else. I think Huxley also talked about how like that society was so, in a way, unproductive, because there wasn't a lot of new ideas happening in the world state, and no one was making anything interesting or new or novel or anything. And people with new ideas sort of went to the islands almost, right? So it's all of that. And I think that in modern day society, this addiction to social media and being on your phone so much sort of causes there not to be a lot of motivation. There isn't a way that people don't come up with these new ideas as much. And I feel like it's just decreasing the productivity of our society in that sense.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah, so I think that's it's really cool how Huxley's narrative sort of applies to our world today.
Right.
And I didn't even think about that until you said that. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, like when you're bored, or when you go for a walk with someone, or even if you go for a walk with yourself without your device, without your headphones, you're thinking about ideas. You're thinking about your life. You're thinking about different avenues you can go down in life. Like that's just coming into your mind usually. And if you're constantly scrolling and consuming things, you're not thinking about the next creation or the new idea. You're just consuming. It's a totally different mode of thinking, right?
I know. And I could be sitting on my phone. I'm addicted to that thing. Like I could be sitting on my phone and just scrolling. It could flip through Instagram Reels or TikToks, and an hour and a half will go by and I thought it was like 5 minutes. Because I don't even realize. Like it's so interesting how it's so addictive, and it causes you not to have these like social connections, because then you don't get out of your house on the weekends. You don't go hang out with your friends. There's no motivation for you to go hang out with people, because you can just sit on your phone and sort of just get that same dopamine rush almost. But it's not real. And it leads to like people start to realize that, and they can't like get off of it. And I feel like it leads to a lot of depression nowadays. There's been a lot of talk about depression caused by social media. That's just really interesting.
Yeah, and that's what the Soma pill is in the book.
Yes,
it's like a quick dopamine rush. It's a quick escape from reality. And that's what's interesting is that Lenina, the one character, goes into this reservation and she's like, oh my God, I need my soma. I need something to escape what I'm looking at right now. And that's what happens in social situations all the time. It's like, if you don't know what to talk about with your friend, we both just go on our phones.
Yeah, oh my gosh, it's so rude. Like I hear all these, or at least, like I never thought it was rude, but then I hear all these adults that grew up, you know, without phones, and they're like, oh, that's so rude. I hate when people do that. And it's just like, to them, that's just so different. And I agree. I think it should be viewed as rude because it's just like you should learn how to deal with these situations that are more difficult to navigate, because then it just doesn't give you any experience with that. So yeah, for sure. But I also remember the scene where John is throwing the boxes of soma, you know, where he's with the deltas, with one of the lower castes, I think, is the deltas in the story. He's like throwing the boxes of soma, like, this is poison, like don't do it, like don't. And they don't really understand. And then when John is subdued by the police, they sort of just like pay him no mind and go back to it. Like it's just so hard to break out of that pattern and that addiction.
Interesting. We're not quite there yet, but I'm excited to get there. We're about halfway through.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't want to spoil it.
No, don't spoil it. No, it's great.
Okay.
I'm excited to read it with my class, though. And what period do you have this class?
I have it first period. My schedule switched. I think it's even.
Even.
Because my schedule switched, so I had your class odd, and then it went to even. And now I have a free period during the odd day.
Gotcha. Well, Mason, thank you very much for joining us today. Maybe we'll put down Watchmen, but we'll also put down Brave New World as your book rec.
Well, I almost brought in Brave New World, so that was cool. Okay, Perfect. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Cesare.